During the Ukrainian refugee crisis, a specific incident revealed deep issues of inequality and bias. Ruigatu Faith Maxey, a Sierra Leonean American, was told by the bus driver, and I quote, "All blacks need to get off the bus," and I quote. This blatant discrimination highlighted the absence of humanitarian efforts towards non-white refugees and revealed a pattern of selective empathy towards white people. Aid has been critically restricted by pervasive Eurocentric sentiments, limiting support for refugees of non-European descent. Despite advancements, a Eurocentric worldview has significantly influenced the Western response to the Ukrainian refugee crisis. While refugees of non-European descent face biases and challenges, Western countries prioritize assistance for Ukrainian refugees of European descent, demonstrating disparities in humanitarianism and aid distribution due to perceived shared cultural values. The Ukrainian refugee crisis has highlighted instances of racial discrimination against individuals from African and Middle Eastern backgrounds. Reports emerged of Muslim, Nigerian, Indian, and Lebanese victims in Ukraine facing obstacles such as being denied access to trains and difficulties at border crossings. Nigerian student Adonis Oyo Owolabi expressed worries about friends left behind, struggling to find essential resources like food and water. He voiced his concerns, saying, and I quote, "Some of my friends are still there, and I'm very worried. I text them to know what they're doing, if there is food or water, because right now the stores are closed, and hopefully they get out of Ukraine safe and no harm comes upon them," and I quote. In response to this racism, the African Union criticized the Ukrainian government for practicing such shockingly racist acts that are clearly in breach of international law. This uneven treatment and the prioritized assistance provided to Ukrainian refugees illustrate the persistence of a Eurocentric worldview in the Western humanitarian response. Eurocentrism manifests not only in the acts of humanitarian aid and denial of assistance in searching refugees, but also through media coverage, which shapes perceptions and reinforces biases against non-Western-centric cultures. A poignant example in the commentary of Charlie D'Agata, the CBS News senior and foreign correspondent who remarked, and I quote, "Ukraine isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has been seeing conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose these words carefully too, city, one where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen," and I quote. Such explicit biases expressed by media personalities contribute to the problem of mainstream media coverage of non-white cultures, insinuating that people of Middle Eastern heritage are barbaric and uncivilized. These narrowing narratives misrepresent the realities of the crisis and directly influence the allocation of international aid and support. Biased reporting creates an environment where Western descent individuals become more inclined to help those they perceive as culturally similar, while marginalized foreign narratives are plights. The media portrayal of specific demographic groups of Ukrainian refugees has been stained by racism. An NBC News report contrasted Ukrainian refugees with those from Syria, emphasizing the Ukrainians' identities as more quote-unquote relatable and familiar to Western audiences. These are not refugees from Syria, these are Christians, they're white, they're similar to us. This divisive and dehumanizing rhetoric reinforces a Eurocentric bias in mainstream media, drawing a line between us and the other. These biases prioritize and valorize certain refugees over others based on religion and skin color, underlining a systematic issue where Eurocentrism dictates the allocation of empathy, resources, and support in times of crisis. The Ukrainian refugee crisis continues to reveal systematic inequality and bias in Ukraine's neighboring borders, in Western countries and in Western media. This is epitomized by experiences of Sierra Leonean American Ruigatu Faith Maxey, or Nigerian student Adonis Oyo Owolabi, and many others. This selective empathy helped directed exclusively to European refugees, and I quote, who resemble the physical features of being white with blonde hair established during Eurocentric values. This narrow focus marginalizes non-European descent refugees globally, misrepresenting the crisis and reinforcing a divisive us versus them narrative. Media coverage can do good, but it can also be an agent of harm. Moving forward, Western societies must confront and overcome their Eurocentric views and the suitable and subtle racism embedded within their cultivating an inclusive environment for all individuals. Regardless of their background, this requires collective efforts to address global issues with unity, confronting Eurocentrism and racism to create a more equitable and inclusive world.